My preaching this week is perhaps more a preaching of the heart than of the head. It arises from my experience of life, sometimes encounter in ministry, sometimes just because of life, and being human in the face and encounter of real life with real people. Today is the first Sunday in Advent. I suppose we could say it's our New Year's Day. Advent, we know, is a time where we look back at what has been, look back at the story, back to the birth of Jesus, and we look forward with expectation to what is yet to come and perhaps apprehension if Marcus to be believed. This Advent time is the beginning of an intentional time of preparation from which we proclaim that in this creation, pregnant with divine possibility, God comes to life, indeed and in person. God, knowable, intimately familiar with the beauty and joy, the suffering and the struggle that is life in this world. If you haven't read What's Happening Yet, which is at the rear, this Advent we have a bit of a theme we're going to explore. The words go something like this: at the moment in our world we have many dialogues of despair. The characters that populate Advent face into their worlds of despair and bring a different conversation. They all bring words and actions of hope, not empty hope or wishful thinking, but hope grounded in experience and faith. This Advent, we will explore what happens when we engage in those places with dialogues of hope. This year, perhaps more than ever, seems to be one that faces us each and every day with what I can only describe as hard and horrid stories of the harm we can visit on one another and on our world. Although this isn't new, there seems this last year to have been an escalation. The underground, what I and perhaps we may have hoped was a small rivulet of such things of xenophobia and misogyny, of nationalism and bigoted prejudice and hatred, has somehow become legitimised because of certain types of leadership we have at the moment. What we might have hoped was a depleted rivulet, unfortunately, has quite a flow. Division, fracture, violence, and brokenness seem to be prevailing. The ripple of effect of this is known in our lives. It's known in the lives of our friends, our community, our city, our country. It is not just over there. In this place, this set-apart place of church, I wonder often if we come here as a place for some respite from those stories. We want and need solace and succour so we can bear the burden, the weight of these things. And of course, this is a good and reasonable thing to do and to expect, to find rest and rejuvenation here. However, it also seems to me that this is the place, and we, the particular community of people with calling to bring to this place those hard and those horrid stories, and together to speak of them, to face them, to sit together with them, to acknowledge what arises in us in response, whether it is fear or rage or frustration or helplessness or anxiety or deep, deep sorrow. Not that we be overwhelmed, but so that in this place, with our seeking and searching companions who are here, we are able together to bear the burden, to lay down its weight for a while, for it to be safe here, to be our honest and our truthful selves, open to ask, is this the only way our world can be? These hard and horrid stories reveal the way our world is, or at least how it has become. It has not happened by chance. It has become this way because a particular way of telling the story of being human has prevailed. Wired for catastrophe, it would be easy enough for this morning's biblical text to reinforce our anxiety if we took them out of their context and time, if we took them literally and pasted them over our day and age. It would seem nothing much has changed. In some ways, that's true. And yet, is it not also the case that we name the stories that we hear as hard and horrid because there is another story, There is an alternate story that has different outcomes and changes the way things are. The way things are in our world is not inevitable. It is not necessarily the way things have to be. And this is where we, you and I, the particular people in our time in this place who hear this story, come in. Each Sunday in Advent we add a word, a theme if you like: hope, peace, joy and love. We gather these things and say they issue forth in the person of Jesus, God with us, born on Christmas Day. The light from the Advent wreath goes brighter as each Sunday we add a candle until on Christmas 5 are burning. It is a fine sentiment and a beautiful tradition. But it is symbolic of a deeper significance, not empty or wishful thinking, though. These things are made real in time. What would it be like in our challenging times for us to take seriously the lineage of our religious narrative, to see it as a resource for our world rather than an excuse to turn from our world? Together to seek and to look for, with expectation to find, to make real in the world, hope and peace and joy and love, not an exercise in sentimentality, but to seek where and how these things are present with us, able to be discerned and seen and spoken of. As church, we get named the body of Christ in the world. Together, we have the potential to be God with us. Equally in this season, God is revealed as present to us. How open are our eyes to see that presence where we do not expect to find it, where we least expect to find it, where it needs the love and nurture of people like us to grow into the fullness of life. Earlier this year, I journeyed with a family who had lost a beloved child to suicide. That funeral was jam-packed with friends, beautiful, talented, societal fringe-dwelling friends on the cusp of adulthood, amazing young people. Questioning, challenging, bursting with creative energy in music and dress and word, seeking and searching, asking and probing to understand why and how and where they fit, where they could have a place to stand to be themselves, to bring their brilliance into being, to contribute to the world, not really fitting the mould required to conform to the expectations we now have for what success looks like. Many cruised the fringes and explored the shadowlands where certainty and safety are truly tested. After the funeral, when we were standing outside, and there were all these young people there, I was asked, well, perhaps challenged about what I saw. What did I see there? What did I think of this eccentric, unconventional, testing boundary lot of young people? I said something like this: I see a whole lot of beautiful, talented, creative young people bursting to express themselves, to have a purpose, to be told who they are matters, that they don't have to become somebody else to already belong. You can see how hard it is for them to live within the confines of convention, the scarring, the tattoos, the piercings, the need for substances that numb. We don't seem, in our society, to make space for this eccentricity. At the same time, we're in desperate need of their energy and creativity, to take their questioning seriously for the challenge it provides us about our assumptions, about what we value, whether the way we live aligns with those values, whether we do what we say. It says something about how our society has become when too many of our beautiful young people see no place or future for them in it. But what have they to look forward to? If you strip away the acquisition of money and of material possessions, that litany of things you acquire over time so you can tick the box and say, yeah, I passed that marker post, where is the art of being human in all of that? Where is the who I am that is not about what I have in all of this? Each of us is an intended creation. Each of us is desperately needed by our communities, for our communities. Each of us makes a whole. It is true that I felt a challenge was laid down. The questioning asked of me, Who am I? Kitted out in religious garb, in a context where most of the people gathered had little, from askance suspicion of through to outright hostility towards organised religion. Who am I to speak? Who am I, not in relationship with most there, to stand, to lead and hold them through this pivotal gathered time of their grieving farewell? It is right for me to be challenged about how it is I perceive those before me, whether I include them as they are, in any words I might speak of divine inclusion, of being beloved of God. It is right for me to be challenged whether I am trying to cast a religious overlay over the context that would lack integrity to the people there, and speak or put in their mouths words of faith that do not mean anything to them, and seek to make them say things they don't agree to. It is right for me to be challenged if I void divine presence from the whole context. How am I a person of integrity? It is right for me to stand silent before the hostile stare, the suspicious glance, the agony of death in the prime of life, to stand with those shuddering tears and heartful lament of song, willing to bear the weight and the thrust of what is real in that moment, to stay there, to not turn away or slide into glib or well-practiced turns of phrase that turn to dust upon their speaking. As we talked, and dared to venture to speak of all the things that mattered most, of disbelief and loss of hope, of beauty frustrated through lack of care and context, of displacement and struggle for identity in a world that seems to hold up only one image, one mirror of what it is to be a person of value and worth, of belonging. It was as we talked honestly and frankly and often about the failure of organised religion, naming truthfully frustrations of untruth and disillusion and disappointment, that the tension shifted. The energy changed. The challenge now became, how come there's no place to talk about these things? Isn't this what the church should be like? What church should be about? Maybe, I said, this is what we're doing now. Maybe this is what being church looks like. And maybe we only have this moment to be that with one another. It was not expected, this God with us moment revealed in that exchange. It was not as I expected either. It was real, though. We have a story that has lament, that laments suffering and fear and pain. We have a story that cries out with harsh words of accusation, anger and blame, honest, heartrending and true. We lament and cry out, for we know things can be other than this way. That is the story we stand in. A story of divine presence with us, threaded through creation, through us, our life, all of life. It is a story that is brought to life through people who inhabit it, who are strong enough to be still and to bear the weight and heft of life, and still insist and speak and live into being the hope and the peace and the joy and the love of God, who is knowable because of one another. People who are willing, through their bodies and in their lives, to bring the life of God to life, for the life of this world.